Matthew here from MiniWarGaming.com, and this is Let's Build a List. We are continuing the series of videos of where I've been building 1,750 point Tyranid lists that are semi-competitive, semi-fun, super competitive, super fun, however you want to look at it. Today we're going to look at the Monstrous Creature list. Now this has changed significantly since 5th edition, or the 4th edition Tyranids, I should really say, when you could just spam Carnifexes. This Monstrous Creature list doesn't have any Carnifexes. Not that they're not effective, but we'll get into that maybe at a later time. Let's take a look at the Monstrous Creature Tyranid list. Here is our 1,750 point list of monstrous creatures from Tyranids. Now, Tyranid monstrous creatures have some major advantages over other races, particularly the fact that they're one of the few races that have monstrous creatures as opposed to vehicles. This is going to rely a lot on psychic powers, but thankfully they're well endowed with that using the Biomancy. That's always my favorite. You can experiment with some of the other ones, but Biomancy by far is the competitive one that'll help you do a lot. So what do we have? Well, for our two HQ choices, we have two winged hive tyrants. Now, you could swap out one of these for a Swarm Lord. The Swarm Lord is pretty awesome, but he's slow. He only moves his normal 6 inches just like everybody else. And so even though he is just a beast in close combat, I find that it's sometimes difficult to get him into close combat unless you're facing a close combat army such as the Orcs. Otherwise, he just gets shot down. He has a 4+ invulnerable save, but only in close combat. Otherwise, he's just relying on his 5 wounds and 3+ armor save, which, with the firepower that is out there in 40k, is not very much. So this list will focus a lot on psychic powers, which is why I like to bring the Hive Tyrants and the Turbogons. Once again, we have two Turbogons. These are troop choices, and so I had to bring the two minimum groups of 10 Termagants. And these Turbogons will spawn even more Termagants, which will help grab objectives, harass the opponent, provide extra targets, whatever it is that it needs to do. Then we have two Trigons. Now in this case, for the points, I was only able to make one of them a Trigon Prime, and then the other one's just a regular Trigon. But if you mess around with the points, you might find that you can make them both a Trigon Prime. Depends on the upgrades that you bring. And we have a Tyrannifex. So let's go over each of the units and what I've brought for them. And by the way, this is how I would deploy them, because your winged Hive Tyrants are your weakest point in this army. Because unlike the Turbogons and the Trigons and the Tyrannifex, they only have 4 wounds with their 3+ save, whereas everybody else has 6, and the Tyrannifex has a 2+ save, as opposed to everybody else's 3+ armor save. So starting with the Hive Tyrants, as you can see, they have wings. This allows them to swoop or glide. They have to start gliding, because if I place them on the board, they're gliding. If I place them in reserve, they'd be swooping. But if they survive the first round of shooting, which they usually do, then they can quickly go into swooping mode and get across. One of them I usually make a shooting one, and the other one a very close combat one. This purple one we'll call the shooting one. Typically we'll give him 2 sets of twin-linked Devours. This will give him 12 twin-linked strength 6 shots, which is very beefy. That's actually good enough to take down most flyers out there, so this can actually be used against flyers. He'll have 12 twin-linked shots. If he's swooping, then he can Skyfire, which means he does not fire at ballistic skill of 1, which is very useful. And it's also really good anti-infantry because, well, 12 shots at strength 6, it'll do the trick. It's AP nothing, but most of the weapons in the Tyranid list are AP 5 or 6 or 4, which doesn't usually do anything. The other Hive Tyrant's a close combat oriented one. He's got the Lash Whip and Bone Sword and Scything Talons, just the way that he looks. That makes him very difficult to kill in close combat. Now, just because he's only close combat doesn't mean he doesn't have a bit of shooting, because with the Biomancy powers, it is possible that he will get 1 or 2 shooting powers that come with Biomancy. So you can still use them, swoop them across, use the psychic powers to do some shooting as well. Whereas the other one, you hope that you get the more augmentive ones like Iron Arm or Endurance, because he already has 2 weapons, and so he can only fire 2 weapons as a monstrous creature. As for the other upgrades, like Old Adversary to give them preferred enemy, if you can fit them in points-wise, Old Adversary is a nice one, because it'll give them preferred enemy, which is obviously really good with shooting. He's already twin-linked with his shooting though, so preferred enemy is not always necessary, but he does also grant it to anything within 6 inches, which is very helpful. Our 2 Trigons, they're pretty straightforward. I don't really give him any upgrades, even though some of them can be nice. I just kind of keep him the way they are. If it's a prime, he'll have 12 strength 5 shots. If he's just a regular one, he'll just have 6 shots. That's why I like to give him the prime, and also the prime because of Monstrous Creature as well. The Tyranids, his weapons, there's the different ones that people like to bring. The Rupture Cannon being 2 strength 10 AP 4 shots is nice for anti-vehicle, but it's only 2 shots with Ballistic Skill 3, so it's typically not very reliable. What is reliable, however, is if you make him a close combat killer. Because if you give him the Acid Spray, which is the template, which you can place, it's a torrent template, so you can place it 12 inches away from him, and that's a strength 6, and then he's got his built-in flesh borers, or his built-in thorax weapon, which he can fire for free. The Tyranids can essentially fire 3 weapons because he has his thorax and 2 weapons as well. The thorax weapons for the Tyranids can be fired, and it does not count against one of your normal firing attacks. And so the thorax one that's rending, or the one that's automatic 2+ for wounding against only infantry, those are the ones that I like to take. But the other one, the strength 5 one, is nice as well. Just depends what you're up against. And then the Acid Spray is nice, or the Rupture Cannon. The Flesh Borer Hive, that does a ton of strength 4 shots. It's nice, but for his points costs, you might as well just bring a ton of Termagants, because he's over 200 points once you start giving him all these things. Termagants are 5 points each, so you can easily bring 40 Termagants instead of him. So why just give him the same weapons as a Termagant? It's something I always think. I always have a hard time bringing Tyranids because of how expensive they are, but they are quite effective, and they are very tough to kill. Then we got our Termagants, and you can guess, if you've watched the other Let's Build a List videos that I've done, what they are upgraded with. Of course, Crushing Claws, Adrenal Glands, and Toxin Sacs, and 1 extra Psychic Power. That way, they get plus D3 smash attacks in close combat to take out vehicles. They also have 3 Psychic Powers, so you're likely to get ones that you want from the Biomancy. And they, of course, have Adrenal Glands and Toxin Sacs, giving them Furious Charge and poison attacks to themselves and any Termagants that they spawn, or otherwise, within 6 inches of them, making them very effective in close combat and making the Termagants that much more potent around them. And that's really all there is to this list. If it goes up to 2,000 points, then you might be able to fit in something else like another Tervagon, or perhaps upgrading one of the Trigons or bringing another Tyranid. It's really up to you. This is very effective against a lot of armies. Once again, it falls short against shooty armies with lots of AP2 and AP3 weapons, or even AP1, because they might be able to take you down rather quickly from a distance. An all flyer list though, or a heavy flyer list, this army can actually take on, especially if you know there's lots of flyers, that you can make both of your Hive Tyrants shooting Hive Tyrants, and then they can easily take down 2 flyers per turn. And you have a lot more control where they can shoot than where flyers, as they have a 360-degree basically shooting radius, whereas the most flyers can only shoot forward. These guys still fly the same as flyers when they're swooping, but they shoot like Monstrous Creatures, which is just awesome. And they don't die nearly as easily as flyers do as well, once there's something that can target them. So there is our all Monstrous Creature list. What do you think? Leave a comment below. Do you think this would beat your army? Do you think that you have something that would be the automatic counter to this? Or would your army really have a hard time against this many toughness 6 or toughness 7 or toughness 8 or toughness 9, depending on how many iron arms are thrown out there, and lots of little termagants skittering around as well. This is Matthew from MiniWarGaming. Happy wargaming.